You ever struggle with trying to learn syntax and wish you could wrap your head around it within just a few minutes? I know I have. I've jumped into new languages before and not knowing the syntax. Syntax is the backbone of any good programming language, and it's the difference between having a bunch of mumbled up random characters and symbols and having your code be able to compile and execute properly. This video and series is all about learning syntax for various different languages and projects. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, let's hop right into the code. First things first, today we're talking about for loops. More specifically, the different types of for loops, the syntax for a for loop, and how you can write a for loop in Python. So we'll get started. I have here a couple examples. We're gonna go one by one through each example. I'm gonna explain exactly what that example is kind of used for, what kind of data types or data structures you can use it on, things like that. And yeah, so first is foremost, we have a basic for loop, right? So the basic for loop, as we all know, is used to just iterate over a list or a tuple or something like that. So we have this list of fruits right here, and we're going to basically just say for fruit. So we create a variable. This variable isn't declared anywhere else, right? It's declared right here. So we obviously, fruits is plural, fruit is singular. So we just say fruit. And that's the variable that we're going to be able to access, which will eventually become the value at each one of these indexes, index 0, 1, and 2, right? And then we're going to say in, so it'll be for the variable that you want to say, in, and then the list or tuple or set or whatever you're kind of looping over here. In this case, we're looping over a list of fruits. So at index 0, we have apple, then 1 banana, and 2 cherry, right? So if I run this code and we're printing each one out, this will iterate over each one. So on the first iteration, this will be apple. So we'll see apple print out, and then it'll be banana and then cherry. And then because there's no more, that'll be it, right? So I'm gonna run this code, and it looks like it's trying to run all of the commented out code, but let's just do this. There we go. And we will run it, and I'll just create paste that in there just to have for later. So we'll run this again. That's weird. What did you mean for? Oh, this is hidden for some reason. There we go. Get rid of that. All right, let's run this code. So like I said, on the first iteration is apple, then on the second banana, and then cherry, right? Very simple. It's very straightforward. Just a regular for loop, and this is how you do it in Python. So next, we're gonna do the for loop for a for range loop, and we're gonna copy this code, and we're just gonna bring it on over. Boom, uncomment this, and we'll comment this out. So for range is basically the same thing, but instead of the same thing, we just say for, and then we declare a variable, and then the keyword in, and then we use this keyword range. This is a function that takes in the number of iterations that you want to do. So what will happen is this will loop or 5 times technically. So we'll loop 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Which is a total of 5 times. But because we started at 0, so if you wanted to loop 25 times, you'd have to say 26, right? And so the range actually takes 3 different arguments. And so the 3 arguments that range takes is, if we hover over it, it takes a start. So where you want to start an index, where you want to stop, and a step. So like, let's say that we start at 0 and we want to go to 11, because remember, we want to go to 10 technically, but we need to go to 11 to get to 10. And then we want to go by 2s, right? So if we were to print this out, this would actually print out numbers from to 10, yeah, with a step of 2. So when it says step, it's just going to go 2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. It's just going to add 2 every time. So if we run this code, you can see we got 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And like I said, remember on the stop part, you have to be exclusive, I think is the proper term for that. Basically, you can't include, or I guess inclusive, you have to include the extra spot. And that's a regular for range loop. This is usually used for scenarios where maybe you want to add 2 to something or do something based on like a range. So yeah, so that's the for range loop. So we'll comment this out, and we'll bring over the next loop variation, which is enumerate loop. So basically this one, which is pretty cool, I think. we'll uncomment this fruits because it's referencing it right here, right? So same old for keyword in keyword. But what's cool about this is it will basically take a list and it'll keep count of what index you're currently on and the value of that index. So this would be in scenarios where maybe you need like a counter. So or whenever you reach a certain index, you do something. This would be useful for that. I think it's pretty cool. So what we would see here is we would see side by side 0 for apple. We would see 0 in apple, and then 1 in banana, and then 2 in cherry. So if we run this, you can see we're getting that in the console, which is pretty cool. So this would work well for sometimes maybe like you need to have like a counter or just remembering that index, which ones. So that way every time you don't have to basically find the index of wherever this fruit is in the fruits list. So I thought that was pretty cool. Next one is the zip for loop, right? This one's also really cool, I think. So the zip for loop is pretty neat. So we have 2 lists right here, and each index is kind of correlated to each other. So Alice is 25, Bob is 30, and Charlie is 35. Typically you would probably make a dictionary at this point, but maybe there's another scenario where you need lists or something. Maybe you need to be faster, I don't know. But this is pretty cool. So you could use the zip function. So same old for keyword in keyword, and the name is going to keep count of whatever the first list is. So like just like in a regular basic for loop, fruit is the variable for fruits, well, name is the variable for the first list or whatever you're looping over, and then age is the first variable for the second, or the second variable for the second list, right? And so then we can kind of do like f string here and kind of combine them, or we could use them for something else. So if I print this out, you'll see the name and then is the age. So run this. Alice is 25 years old, Bob is 30 years old, and Charlie is 35 years old. Right? Pretty cool, pretty neat. You can also use, I'm pretty sure, where anytime where you need 2 lists to run parallel at each other. So run at the same time, basically. And so the next one would be a list comprehension, which is pretty neat. This is cool for like those one-liners, I think. So like, let's say in this example, or we need to make a list that has the squares from 0 to 5 or to 4, right? And so what this will do is we have a variable. So first we declare the name of the list we want, and then we set that equal to these brackets. So we put brackets first, and then we'll declare the variable x. And you could call this whatever you want. This is the same as just if you did it up here. So instead of x, we could just call it y if we even wanted. But make sure you use it the same. So this is basically your statement, and then this is like whatever kind of condition you want to happen. So for each y, or in this case on the first loop, it'll be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, right? We want to basically to the power of 2 it. So we want to square it. And so what will happen is on the first iteration, 0 to the power of 2 is 0, and then 1 is 1, 2 is 4, 3 is 9, and then 4 is 16, right? So that's kind of what's happening here. So if we run it, you'll see we get a list, and we print that out. We get a list with all those values in it, which is pretty cool. So you can actually also replace this with another list. So I could put fruits here if I even wanted. That kind of wouldn't work because you can't square the strings, but if you wanted to manipulate the strings in some way, you could sort them or do something like that. And that's a list comprehension. It's pretty cool, neat one-liner basically. Next one's going to be a nested for loop. So nested for loops kind of when you want to loop over like a 2-dimensional list or something like that, which is what we have here. So we have this matrix and it's a list of lists. And so we have this one list, as you can see by the blue brackets, and then at each index there's a list, right? So like, let's say we want to loop over the row in the matrix, which is this. So this is basic 4, and then in a row becomes that variable or that value at the index that we're currently on. So on the first loop, it'll become this. So row will become this first list. And then we're just saying what list to start with. So then from there, we'll loop over row because row is a list. So we can loop over it again. And then there we can print these out. So at each stop, it'll kind of work like this. So at the first list 0 index, we're going to print out from the first list 1, 2, and 3, the first index right here. It'll loop over these and then print out 4, 5, and 6, and then 2, 7, 8, 9, right? So it'll basically, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pretty neat, pretty cool. It's pretty useful. This is more so when you need to loop through a two-dimensional array or a list, basically. So the next one we have is basically basic for loops, but it's just the syntax for if you need to use a break or continue. If you don't know what a break or continue is, I'll show you right now. So breaks and continues are if you want to basically break out of a for loop, or if you want to just continue and skip over what's everything after the continue, right? So in this first one, we have range, so to go from 0 to 4. So I will be 0 to 4. So when I becomes 3, we're going to break, meaning that we'll only see 0, 1, and 2. We'll never see 3 because when it equals 3, it enters this if statement and then it breaks out and the for loop ends. So we should see 0, 1, and 2 and not 3 and 4. Then on this one, it's basically the same thing, but instead when I equals 3, we're just going to continue, meaning we're going to keep doing the for loop, but we're just not going to do this part. Anything after continue, it's not going to happen. It's just going to skip to the next iteration. So on this one, we should see 0, 1, 2, and then skip 3 and then 4. So let's see what we got. So on the first one, we have 0, 1, 2, like I said, and then it equals 3 and then it breaks. And then on this one, we have 0, 1, 2, 4. So on the second loop, it basically skipped 3 because we hit the continue and everything after continue does not happen. So those are for loops with breaks and continues. Pretty neat, pretty useful, especially for scenarios where like you're trying to do some type of game or something, I think. And then last but not least, we have for loops for dictionaries. Dictionaries are really useful. So that's where that print value was. It was just hanging out there. Okay, cool. So what we'll do is we'll uncomment this. So we have this dictionary called person. And we could do a couple things, and there's a couple of scenarios where you might want to use just the keys and do something with them, or maybe you want to get the keys and the value at the same time, or maybe you just want the values. So there's these 3 scenarios. So for the first one, you can say the for keyword, the in keyword. Now from left to right, you can name these variables whatever you want, but this is kind of how it will work. So when we call So person is our dictionary. When we call the method items on any dictionary, what it'll basically do is it'll give us an array and or a list, and it'll give us a key and a value in those. So on this first loop, what we'll see is the first key and then the value. So the first key is name and then the value is will. And then we'll see on the second loop, age, and then the number, the value, right? So that's on this one. And then for the second loop, have the for and in, so specify your variable. So if you don't say anything on the object and you just loop over the object, the value will be the key by default. And so then we could print the key out here. On the first loop, it would be name and then age on the second. And then for last, if we call .values on a dictionary, it will only give us the values. So we'll basically get an array of just will and 25. And then from there, we use our variable that we made, declaring right here, to access those values on each loop. And they go in order. So it might help if I do this. There we go. You can kind of see the order of this, right? So let's run this and we'll see that on the first one, items, we got name, which is the key, and then will, that is the value. And then same thing for the second one, right? So then for the keys, we just got name and age because all we're getting is the keys and these are the keys. And then all we're getting is the values on the last loop, which will be will and 25. So those are for loops in Python, syntax and all, and understanding how and when you should use them. So if you enjoyed the video, I want to appreciate you for watching. And if you could, it really means a lot. It helps the channel out. If you could just leave a like and subscribe. I'm working on a course that's coming up soon, so be on the lookout for that. It's going to be all about basically web development and things like that. And I just want to make sure that it's ready and good to go. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.